The sun hung low over Washington, D.C., casting long shadows across the White House lawn on a crisp April morning in 2025. Inside the iconic building, Karoline Leavitt, the youngest White House press secretary in history at just 27 years old, paced the briefing room with a steely determination in her blue eyes. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, a practical choice for a woman who had little time for vanity amidst the chaos of her role. She had been thrust into the spotlight not just for her age, but for her unwavering loyalty to President Donald Trump, a man she had served since his first administration. Today, though, was different. Today, she wasn't just defending Trump's policies or sparring with reporters over tariffs or immigration. Today, she was preparing to take on a titan of the Democratic establishment, Michelle Obama. The former First Lady had just dropped a scathing podcast episode, mocking Trump's leadership style and calling him a buffoon who stumbled into power twice. The words had lit up social media, with hashtags like #MichelleDropsTruth trending within hours. For Karoline, this wasn't just an attack on her boss, it was personal. She had grown up idolizing strong women, but to her, Michelle's jab was a cheap shot from someone who hadn't faced the relentless scrutiny of a second Trump term. Karoline paused at the podium, her fingers tapping the edge as she rehearsed her response. She knew the press corps would be ravenous for her reaction, and she wasn't about to disappoint. If you love Karoline Leavitt and her fearless spirit, subscribe to the channel now. Her mind raced back to her roots in Atkinson, New Hampshire, where she'd been raised on Fox News and Catholic values, dreaming of a career in broadcast journalism. That dream had morphed into something far bigger, a chance to stand at the heart of American politics, speaking for a president she believed was misunderstood by the elite. Michelle Obama's words had stung, but they also lit a fire in Karoline. She wasn't just some Gen Z upstart. She was a warrior for Trump's vision, and she'd prove it today. The briefing room began to fill with reporters, their notebooks and cameras at the ready. Karoline adjusted her jacket, a sharp navy blazer that screamed professionalism, and took a deep breath. The air buzzed with anticipation. She knew the first question would be about Michelle's podcast, and she was ready to clap back with a ruthlessness that would leave no doubt about her loyalty or her skill. As the clock struck 1 p.m., she stepped forward, her voice steady and commanding. "Good afternoon, everyone," she began, her tone laced with a subtle edge. "Before we get to your questions, I want to address something that's been making waves out there." Michelle Obama decided to take a swing at President Trump, calling him a buffoon and questioning his leadership. "Well, let's talk facts instead of feelings, shall we?" The room went silent, every eye locked on her. Karoline leaned into the podium, her confidence unshakable. Michelle Obama had 8 years in this very house to push her husband's agenda, and what did we get? A healthcare system that's still a mess, an economy that limped along, and a legacy of apologies to the world for America being America. President Trump, on the other hand, has delivered results: tax cuts, border security, and a roaring economy before Biden's team tanked it. So, if anyone's stumbling here, it's the former First Lady, tripping over her own hypocrisy while she lectures us from her ivory tower. A murmur rippled through the crowd, some reporters scribbling furiously, others exchanging glances. Karoline didn't flinch. She was just getting started. She straightened up, her gaze sweeping the room like a general surveying the battlefield. "Let's be real," she continued, her voice rising with conviction. "Michelle Obama's not mocking Trump because she thinks he's a joke. She's mocking him because he's a threat to the cozy little world the Obamas and their friends built, where elites pat each other on the back while regular Americans get left behind. Trump's not perfect, but he's a fighter. He's taken bullets, literal and figurative, for this country, and he's still standing. Can Michelle say the same? The jab landed hard, and Caroline could see it in the reporters' faces. Some smirked, others squirmed. She knew she'd crossed a line into personal territory, but she didn't care. This was war, and she was armed to the teeth. Flashbacks of her journey flickered through her mind as she spoke. She remembered the long nights at St. Anselm College, juggling a softball scholarship with political op-eds that ruffled feathers on campus. She'd written about Trump's travel ban in 2017, calling the press crooked for their coverage, a stance that earned her both praise and hate mail. That tenacity had landed her an internship at Fox News, then a gig in Trump's first White House as a presidential writer. By 2022, she was running for Congress in New Hampshire, winning the Republican primary only to lose to Chris Pappas in the general election. Defeat had been bitter, but it fueled her return to Trump's orbit as his 2024 campaign press secretary. Now, here she was, the youngest voice in the West Wing, facing down a former First Lady with nothing but her wits and her words. Back in the briefing room, a reporter from CNN raised his hand, his tone dripping with skepticism. "Caroline, don't you think it's a bit rich to call out Michelle Obama for living in an ivory tower when President Trump spends weekends at Mar-a-Lago?" The question was a trap, but Caroline was ready. She smiled, a sharp, knowing smile, and leaned into the mic. "Nice try, Jim. Mar-a-Lago's not a tower. It's a home he built with his own success, not taxpayer dollars." Michelle and Barack raked in millions from book deals and speeches after leaving office, preaching about equality while they hobnob with celebrities. Trump's wealth came before politics. He doesn't need this job. He does it because he loves this country. Next question. The reporter sat back, visibly rattled, and Caroline felt a surge of adrenaline. She was in her element. Across town, Michelle Obama sat in a sleek recording studio, sipping tea as she listened to the live feed of Caroline's briefing. Her podcast, launched amid rumors of marital strife with Barack, had been a hit with her base, but she hadn't expected such a fierce counterattack from Trump's camp. At 61, Michelle was a seasoned public figure, her poise and grace legendary. Yet Caroline's words stung, not because they were true, but because they were bold. She'd underestimated the young press secretary, assuming her youth meant inexperience. Now, she realized Caroline was a different breed, a Gen Z firebrand who didn't play by the old rules of decorum. Michelle set her mug down, her mind already crafting a response for her next episode. This wasn't over. Meanwhile, social media erupted. Clips of Caroline's clapback went viral, with hashtag Caroline Fights Back trending alongside hashtag Michelle vs. Trump. Trump supporters hailed her as a hero, flooding X with praise. "Caroline Leavitt just owned Michelle Obama. Savage," wrote one user. Liberals fired back, calling her Trump's lapdog and accusing her of distorting history. The White House press team watched the metrics soar, a grin spreading across Caroline's face as she scrolled through the posts in her office later that day. She knew she'd struck a nerve, and that was exactly what she'd intended. Trump himself called her that evening, his voice booming through the phone. "Caroline, you're a killer out there. Michelle doesn't know what hit her. Great job, kid." She beamed, the approval of her boss, a man she saw as a father figure, warming her heart. But not everyone was cheering. In the press corps, whispers grew louder about Caroline's aggressive style. "She's too young, too green," muttered a veteran reporter from the Washington Post. "She's just parroting Trump's lines." Others saw her as a breath of fresh air, a disruptor in a stale political landscape. Her decision to open the briefing room to influencers and independent journalists had already shaken things up, and now her ruthless takedown of Michelle Obama cemented her as a force to be reckoned with. Love her or hate her, Caroline Leavitt was impossible to ignore. Days later, the fallout continued. Michelle's next podcast episode dropped, and while she didn't name Caroline directly, the subtext was clear. "Some people think shouting louder makes them right," Michelle said, her voice calm but cutting. "But leadership isn't about tearing others down, it's about lifting people up." The dig was subtle, but Caroline caught it. She fired off a tweet, "Lifting people up is great, but so is telling the truth. President Trump's doing both. Sorry if that's too loud for some." The online war raged on, each side digging in deeper. For Caroline, it was a badge of honor. She'd taken on Michelle Obama and come out swinging, proving she could hold her own against anyone. In the weeks that followed, Caroline's star only rose. She juggled briefings, late-night strategy sessions with Trump, and motherhood. Her son, Nico, born in July 2024, was a constant reminder of why she fought. She wanted him to grow up in a country she believed Trump was saving, free from what she saw as the left's overreach. Her husband, Nicholas Riccio, a real estate developer 32 years her senior, watched her rise with pride, though their age gap drew snide comments from critics. Caroline brushed them off. She'd built her life on her terms, and no one, not Michelle Obama, not the press, would shake her resolve. The clash with Michelle became a defining moment, replayed in news cycles and debated in living rooms across America. Caroline's ruthless clapback wasn't just a defense of Trump, it was a declaration of her own power. She was no longer just the youngest press secretary. She was a player in her own right, a voice for a movement that refused to back down. As spring turned to summer, she stood at the podium again and again, her words sharp, her spirit unbroken. The fight was far from over, but Caroline Leavitt was ready for whatever came next. Summer heat blanketed Washington, D.C., turning the city into a sweltering cauldron of ambition and tension. Caroline Leavitt stood at the White House briefing room podium once more, her navy blazer swapped for a lighter linen suit, though her intensity remained unchanged. The clash with Michelle Obama had morphed into a cultural touchstone, a proxy war between Trump's brash populism and the polished liberalism of the Obama era. Reporters now came armed with sharper questions, probing not just her defense of Trump but her own worldview. "Ms. Leavitt," a journalist from NPR began, "your response to Michelle Obama has been called divisive. Do you worry you're alienating half the country?" Caroline's lips curled into a faint smile. "I'm not here to win a popularity contest," she shot back. "I'm here to tell it like it is. If that ruffles feathers, so be it. Truth doesn't come with a hug." Behind the scenes, Caroline's days grew longer. She'd leave the West Wing at dusk, the sky streaked with orange, only to head home to Nico's bedtime routine. Nicholas would greet her with a glass of wine and a quiet, "You're killing it out there." But the grind was relentless. Trump's second term was a whirlwind of executive orders, slashing regulations, pushing energy independence, and Caroline was the voice tasked with selling it to a skeptical public. Michelle Obama's podcast jab had been just the opening salvo. Now, every word Caroline spoke was dissected by pundits and ex-users alike. She thrived on it, though. The pressure forged her, turning her from a small-town dreamer into a national figure whose every quip went viral. Across the country, Michelle Obama wasn't backing down either. At a book signing in Chicago, she took a veiled swipe at Caroline's youth. "Experience matters," she said to a cheering crowd. "You don't fix a broken system by yelling over it. You learn it, you live it, then you lead." The comment ricocheted online, with Caroline supporters firing back that Michelle was out of touch, and scared of the new guard. Caroline herself didn't bother with a formal response. Instead, she posted a photo on X of herself with Trump at a rally, captioned simply, "Learning from the best. Results over rhetoric." The post racked up millions of views, a silent but searing rebuttal. The feud fueled a broader narrative as the 2026 midterms loomed. Trump's allies saw Caroline as a rising star, a potential candidate to carry his torch. Maybe even back in New Hampshire, where she'd once run for Congress. Democrats, meanwhile, painted her as a symbol of MAGA's excesses, a young woman too eager to parrot a divisive figure. Polls showed the nation split down the middle, with Caroline's approval rating hovering at 48%, a number that thrilled her team and infuriated her critics. She didn't care about the haters, though. "Numbers don't vote," she'd say with a shrug. "People do." One evening in July, Caroline sat in her office, the hum of the air conditioner drowning out the cicadas outside. A framed photo of her with Trump at his 2025 inauguration sat on her desk, a reminder of why she'd signed up for this chaos. Her phone buzzed with a text from Kayleigh McEnany, her predecessor and mentor. "You're rewriting the playbook, kid. Keep swinging." Caroline smiled, then turned to a draft of her next briefing. The topic was Trump's latest infrastructure plan, but she knew the press would circle back to Michelle. She scribbled a line in the margins. "Some build bridges with words. We build them with steel." It was a dig she couldn't resist. The next day, she delivered it flawlessly. "President Trump's putting shovels in the ground while others just talk about unity," she said, her voice crisp. "Maybe Michelle Obama should visit one of our sites, see what real progress looks like." The room erupted, cameras flashing as reporters shouted follow-ups. Caroline held her ground, deflecting with the ease of a seasoned pro. Later, as she debriefed with her team, an aide showed her the X trends. #Caroline Strikes Again was climbing fast. She leaned back in her chair, exhaustion mingling with triumph. This was her arena now. But the victories came with costs. Anonymous threats began trickling into her inbox, vile messages calling her a Trump puppet or worse. Security tightened around her family, with Nicholas insisting on a detail for Nico's daycare drop-offs. Caroline hated it, but she refused to let fear dictate her path. "They don't scare me," she told her husband one night, her jaw set. "They're mad because we're winning." Nicholas nodded, though worry creased his brow. He'd married a fighter, but the stakes were higher now than ever. By fall, the White House was a fortress of activity. Trump, nearing 80, showed no signs of slowing, and Caroline matched his pace. She began hosting a weekly video series, Behind the Podium, streamed on X and Rumble, where she broke down policy wins with a mix of charm and bite. Viewers loved it. Ratings soared past traditional cable news. In one episode, she addressed the Michelle saga head-on. "I respect Mrs. Obama's service," she said, pausing for effect, "but respect doesn't mean silence. She threw a punch, I hit back. That's how it works." The clip spread like wildfire, cementing her as a voice unafraid to challenge sacred cows. Thanksgiving brought a rare break. Caroline took Nico to New Hampshire, where the air was crisp and the leaves long gone. Standing in her childhood backyard, she watched her son toddle through the grass, her mind drifting to the battles ahead. Michelle Obama's camp had gone quiet, but Caroline knew it was temporary. The former First Lady was too savvy to let this fade. Sure enough, December brought rumors of a Michelle-led voter initiative for 2026, a move that could reignite their rivalry. Caroline welcomed it. "Bring it on," she muttered to herself, her breath fogging in the cold. As 2025 closed, Caroline Leavitt stood taller than ever. She'd turned a single clapback into a year-long saga, proving her mettle in a city that chewed up the timid. Trump called her his secret weapon, a nickname she wore with pride. The road ahead was uncertain. Midterms, maybe a Senate run. But one thing was clear. Caroline wasn't just defending Trump anymore. She was building her own legacy, one ruthless, brilliant word at a time. And in the shadow of that legacy, Michelle Obama loomed, a formidable foe waiting for round two. Winter descended on Washington with a biting chill, but Caroline Leavitt barely noticed. January 2026 found her hunched over a desk strewn with briefing notes, her office a fortress of coffee cups and ambition. The year had begun with Trump unveiling a bold energy plan. Drill, baby, drill, redux, and Caroline was its fierce evangelist. At the podium, she touted record-low gas prices and jobs flooding back to the Rust Belt, her words a battering ram against critics still reeling from her Michelle Obama takedown. "This isn't about politics," she declared one frosty morning, her breath visible in the briefing room's glare. "It's about paychecks, heat in your home, and America first. Some folks might not like it, but the numbers don't lie." The press scribbled, X lit up, and Caroline's star burned brighter. Michelle Obama, meanwhile, emerged from her holiday silence with a vengeance. Her voter initiative, Rise Up 2026, launched in Detroit with a speech that electrified Democrats. "We need leaders who unite, not divide," she said, her voice steady and commanding. "Youth isn't enough. Wisdom matters." The crowd roared, and pundits saw it as a direct shot at Caroline's youth and brashness. Watching the live stream from her office, Caroline smirked. "Wisdom's great," she muttered to an aide, "but courage gets things done." She didn't waste time on a formal rebuttal. Instead, she dropped a clip-on behind the podium, showing her at a Pennsylvania oil rig, hard hat on, chatting with workers. "This is unity," she said into the camera. "Jobs for real people." The dueling narratives gripped the nation. Michelle's initiative poured millions into grassroots organizing, targeting swing states with a message of hope and renewal. Caroline countered with Trump's tangible wins, crisscrossing the country to rally his base. In Ohio, she stood before a sea of red hats, her voice booming, "They want to talk about division? Tell that to the families who can afford groceries again because of us." The crowd cheered, and clips of her speech racked up views. X became a battleground. Hashtag RiseUp2026 versus hashtag Caroline keeps winning, each side claiming moral superiority. For Caroline, it was personal now. Michelle wasn't just challenging Trump, but her very existence in this fight. Spring brought whispers of a bigger move. GOP insiders began nudging Caroline toward a Senate run in New Hampshire, where incumbent Jeanne Shaheen faced re-election in 2026. "You're the future," a grizzled strategist told her over dinner at a D.C. steakhouse. "Trump's got 2 years left. Someone's gotta carry the flag." Caroline listened, her mind racing. She loved the podium, the adrenaline of sparring with reporters, but the Senate offered a new arena. She called Nicholas that night, Nico babbling in the background. "What do you think?" she asked. He chuckled. "You're unstoppable, babe. Go for it." By morning, she'd decided, she'd test the waters. Back in the White House, Trump caught wind of the buzz. During a late-night Oval Office meeting, he clapped her on the shoulder. "Senate, huh? You'd shake 'em up, Caroline. Just don't forget who got you here." She grinned, promising loyalty even as her own ambitions simmered. The next day, she hit the podium with renewed fire, dodging questions about her future to focus on Trump's latest trade deal with Canada. But the press smelled blood. "Are you running?" a reporter from Politico pressed. Caroline's eyes twinkled. "I'm running this briefing," she quipped. "That's all you get today." Laughter broke the tension, but the speculation only grew. Michelle Obama's camp watched closely. Her initiative gained steam, registering thousands of new voters, and rumors swirled of a shadow campaign to boost Democratic turnout. Maybe even a prelude to her own political return. Caroline scoffed at the idea during a Behind the Podium taping. If Michelle wants to run, she should stop hiding behind feel-good speeches and step into the ring, she said, her tone daring. The clip went viral, and Trump texted her a thumbs-up emoji. But privately, Caroline wondered, was Michelle the real threat, or just a ghost of the past flexing faded muscle? Summer 2026 tested her resolve. A leaked email from a White House staffer criticized her ruthless style, sparking a media frenzy. Liberals pounced, calling her a bully. Conservatives hailed her as a truth-teller. Caroline weathered it with a shrug, addressing it head-on at a briefing. "If ruthless means fighting for what's right, I'll wear that label proudly," she said. Next question. The storm passed, but it left scars. Her team tightened ranks, and she doubled down on discipline. Nico's first words, "Mama strong," became her mantra, whispered to herself before every battle. By fall, the Senate chatter solidified. Caroline filed exploratory papers in New Hampshire, her home state buzzing with excitement. She campaigned on Trump's record, jobs, borders, strength, while sharpening her own edge. At a rally in Manchester, she took a swing at Michelle's initiative. "They're registering voters. We're rebuilding a country," she roared. "Pick a side." The crowd erupted, and donations poured in. Across the aisle, Democrats scrambled to counter her momentum, with Michelle headlining fundraisers to blunt the MAGA surge. The clash was no longer just words. It was power. Election day loomed, and Caroline's life became a blur of stump speeches and briefings. She juggled White House duties with campaign stops, Nico in tow when she could manage it. Nicholas anchored her, his quiet support a lifeline amid the chaos. On November 8, 2026, she stood in a Concord gym, watching results roll in. Shaheen clung to a narrow lead, but Caroline's numbers climbed. At 2 a.m., the race was called. She'd won by 1.3%. The room exploded, and Trump's voice crackled through her phone. "Senator Leavitt, damn, that sounds good." She laughed, exhaustion giving way to euphoria. Inauguration Day 2027 dawned cold and clear. Caroline took the oath in a navy coat, Nico on her hip, Nicholas beaming beside her. Michelle Obama's initiative had dented Republican gains elsewhere, but New Hampshire was hers. From the Senate floor, she'd fight on, Trump's legacy in her hands, her rivalry with Michelle a simmering undercurrent. At 29, Caroline Leavitt was no longer just a voice. She was a force, ruthless and ready, her story far from finished.